We've just finished importing our Photoshop document into Flash CC and creating a Flash file, and I've moved back to Flash CS6. And the reason why is because I find that it works faster than CC does, at least on my computer. Might be different for your computer, but I'm going to continue with CC, but just realize, I mean with CS6, but just realize all the exact same steps that I'm going apply to both versions of the software. So anyway, I'm going to click Open, and you'll even see that Flash CS6 notices that this is a Flash CC file, and it says you might lose data, but we're not really going to lose anything, I'm pretty sure of. Now, I've imported all those graphics into here, and it seems like it works pretty well. You'll see it has all my layers on the left, and in my library, it has all the items there. Now, there are some things that are different about the way that CC organizes files than CS6. In CS6, everything comes in as bitmaps, and on the main timeline, there's still bitmaps. In Flash CC, it's converted all of those to symbols, and that's going to be really important for our animation. Now, even though it's converted things as symbols, I notice occasionally here it's got some funkiness going on, and I don't know what that's all about personally. Some of these have nothing in them. For example, that particular one had nothing in it. And if I take a look at that one, it has something in it, and that one does not, I believe. You can see it's completely empty, and I'm not sure where that's coming from. But let's see, it seems like everything else is there. Rounded rectangle, find out how. I believe this actually has the graphic. I've got the button, I've got the arrow, the background, and the pet food bowl. So pretty much everything else is fine except for a couple layers that came in, and this will be different depending upon your file. Not that you have to get rid of those, but it's probably a good idea. Anyway, once you have done some cleanup, I'm going to go ahead and save this again, and I'm going to call this a CS6 file so I'm not getting confused myself. Alright, now I'm ready to kind of move on. Now, one of the things that I wanted to point out, which is so special about importing things with CC, is that now these things are really truly vectors. And if I Control plus to zoom in, Control minus to zoom out, you can really see how much cleaner they are. Now, these are somewhat complicated in Flash because things get nested very easily in Flash. So, for example, I'd like to change this red background to something different. In order to do that, I need to go inside of it, because if I look at my properties, you'll see I can't really change anything right now. It just says that it's a movie clip. So now I'm going to go inside of it, and then you'll see that I've got my red background here. So I'm going to click off the other objects, just double click on that red background, and finally I've gotten inside that red background. Now this red background actually has some sort of masked layer thing going on. I don't really know why they've done it this way, but I just want to go back to the button layer, or the button symbol timeline, and what I'm going to do is break apart the graphic here so that I put this background on this layer. The way we do that is select that particular layer, which is the rounded rectangle, right click and choose break apart. Now I'm going to zoom out one more time just so I can click off of that, and I'm going to click on this big red background and delete it, just leaving me this small button. Now when I click on the button by itself, or that small rounded rectangle, you'll see that it's a drawing object. And this is nice because now I have the ability to edit all sorts of things about this, such as stroke and fill, and I can do some other things as well. Style wise, I can change the types of lines on the outside, which I'm not going to do here because all I'm going to do is change the file or change the fill color. Now I've decided that I'd really like to use something different, like use a green, maybe something like that instead of the red. Actually, I think I like maybe a blue better. I think that stands out as being a little bit different than some of the other colors. We'll zoom out a little bit. You can also grab files or colors that exist in your drawings, such as maybe this pink or the red there, something else to highlight it. Anyway, I've now made that button, changed the color of it, and I hope you do as well. And I'm going to go back to scene 1. And now what we're going to do is start to separate out all of our layers. Let's save it again, because I do save pretty often in Flash, because it does have a tendency to crash here and there. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move, I'm going to basically rough out my animation. Now, these are keyframes over on the left-hand side, and I know the top 4 are what I'm looking for. So I'm going to just click and drag through all the eyeballs and just turn on the top 4, and I know that that's the last 4 layers that I want to be able to see. In order to move these back, we're going to have our animation end around 100 frames or so. We might extend it out a little bit. But I'm going to just select these 4 items just by clicking on one keyframe and shift clicking on the last. And then I'm just going to move them out to frame 90. That's it. Now, if we scroll back a little bit, and this is called scrubbing, we scrub back a little bit, you'll see that those no longer appear on the timeline. In order to create another set of keyframes at frame 100, I can go a couple different ways. One way is to right-click and choose Insert Keyframe at the new frame. One of my favorite ways is to select an existing keyframe and press the Alt key and drag over to where I want to duplicate that keyframe to. And this actually works across multiple layers as well. So you can just click on those layers and select them both, the Shift key held down, and then start to drag and press the Alt key, and you'll see that you will duplicate those. Now, the reason that we've done this is so that we have our position for the end set. Then we can go back to frame 90 and we can adjust this animation a little bit. So I know that these layers are all going to kind of move to the right, so I can select all of them at once and just move them over to the right a little bit. Now, I don't have to move too far because I know that they're also going to fade in at the same time. So over on the right under Properties, you'll see that where it says Color Effect Style, and I'm going to change that alpha down to 0. Now, I've done that before, so it automatically applied. The last thing that we want to do is, with all 4 layers selected, or 1 layer at a time, you want to choose right-click and then create Classic Tween. And you'll see now it does the animation. Now, doing everything at the same time is not very effective. So what we do is we adjust the timing. One way to do this is to you got to click on the keyframe first, move it back a few frames, and then you want to click on the next keyframe, the end keyframe, and drag it back a few frames. And I want you to notice how it looks a little bit different. Now you'll see that let's see, the Purina logo comes in first and stops first. And now we're just going to kind of do the same thing with other ones. Drag it back a little bit, drag that one back a little bit. Let's see, it might even do it a little bit more. So I'm just trying to offset these a little bit to make them kind of happen at different speeds. So you can see it's a little bit more interesting when I have that. The last thing that we want to do is adjust our timing, because everything is right now set to linear, and that means it's going to be kind of bumpy looking when it ends. So what we're going to do is click on the tween in between the 2 keyframes, and over on the right hand side it says tweening. Now we'll do ease up to 100%. And what happens is that makes it slow down at the end. So the next one we'll click on, change the ease up to 100%. And you do need to be very specific about clicking in between the 2 keyframes versus clicking on the keyframe itself. So it does make a difference. So here's the animation now at that point. You'll see it slows down, which is really nice. Now we're ready to go backwards and to look at some of the other elements that we have. I'm going to turn on that layer and go back to the very beginning, and I know that that bowl actually exists all the way. So I'm going to duplicate this keyframe by clicking on it once and then holding down the Alt key as I drag it up. I'm going to go up to like, oh, let's do 80 or so. And then I'm going to duplicate that again to frame 90 or so. Because at that point, here's where that particular thing is going to move off to the side, just taking it off the screen just a little bit. And then you right click and choose Create Classic Tween. So you'll see that's kind of going to be what happens. Now be aware that it's okay that this isn't visible anymore at frame 91 because it's off the stage. Now the stage is something we'll deal with in a minute about making sure that that's visible all the time, but you can see we're basically getting that animation to happen. So now we go backwards. Let's do it again. Take a look at the next one. We have the large cat. So this time, instead of duplicating that keyframe, because I know the large cat doesn't last until later, I'm just going to click on the keyframe once and then drag it out to where I want it to be. So I'll say we'll start this cat about 60, and then I'm going to have him last until, let's see, I guess 90 as well. So I'm going to press the Alt key at this point and drag it over to 90. Now, actually, I'm probably going to have him fade out sooner. So I'm going to make a couple other keyframes in here. And the reason I've got these other keyframes, right now they're all the same, is because I need the cat to fade in and then stay at 100% and then fade out. Where exactly this happens, we can adjust a little bit. If I want to take those back to 55, take that to 65, let's take this to 75 and that to 85. You just do need to be aware that you want to click on it and then click on it again to drag it. So anyway, I will now click on that object, click on the alpha, it'll go down to 0. I go to the beginning, I click on the object, I click on the alpha, and take it to 0. Then I can right click, create a classic tween, and then right click and create a classic tween. Now I'm creating the tweens between the ones where it's 0 and 100%, and then that's 100% and then 0. I know it's a little bit weird to animate in Flash. This is just something that a lot of people have just had to get used to in Flash. But I think that looks good because this way he fades out before the other stuff comes in. So now let's go to the medium cat, and we're going to do basically the same thing, but a little bit sooner. I'm going to move over the first keyframe, then duplicate it a couple times, 10 frames in between each. And then you can see, whoops, we've got him coming in all the way at that point. So here he should be 0%. And actually, if we want to be a little bit faster, we can now take that keyframe and duplicate it. Since it's already at 100%, I can just duplicate that with the Alt key held down up to the end, and then create my tweens. Create a classic tween, create a classic tween. So you can see he comes in, and then he fades from one to the other. That works pretty well. So we'll do that with the kitten as well. Now our kitten actually only needs to animate out at the end. So let's do the Alt key held down, because we're going to align these keyframes with the ones where the medium cat is fading in. And then it's a little bit tricky here, so one of the things you can do is turn off the eyeball for that layer. So we can click on the kitten, change the alpha to 0, and then right click and create a classic tween, and you'll see he fades out while the other cat, if we turn that back on, is coming in. So pretty easy. Now we go backwards again, and we have this food is going to last for a while, and it's going to kind of stay all the way throughout. So let's see what happens. We need that to exist all the way throughout. So one of the things I can do is, let's see, I'm going to just kind of drag that out to a point where I think it's supposed to be. And I think what we wanted to do is animate that out. So let's see, that happens to be, oh, I did align it just perfectly. That's the bowl right there, that layer. This bowl layer is not very well named. So there, oops. And that's just double clicking on the text. Bowl. There we go. So now I've got that, and the Alt key held down to be able to drag it out to frame 90 and move it over to the side. Oops. Make sure that we're on the right layer. There it is. So I might even just select the layer, just click on that one keyframe and you select the object in there, and then with the shift and left arrow I can move it off the stage. That's nudging. Then right click and choose Create Classic Tween. So you'll see that we create that tween. Now the last sort of thing that we might want to do is just offset these just a little bit. So I'm going to offset that a couple pixels or a couple of frames, offset that a couple frames. So what happens is one starts before the other, and then the other stuff comes in. And the last one is the background, and that background is white throughout, so we don't really even need that one. So there's a couple things we can do. We can delete that stuff. Boom. Now, we have basically recreated our ad, which is really, really good, but there is one last thing that we want to do before we save this all out. And that is we want to create our border on our advertisement, because it needs that 1 pixel border or so, because it's just a white background. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to drag that layer up to the top. Of course, I could have used one of the layers that was there before. And I'm going to call this layer border by double clicking on it. Now, in the drawing tools, I'm going to look for the one that's called large rectangle. And I'm going to draw a rectangle that goes from one edge to the other. Now, it doesn't look too good, and that's all right because we're about to fix this. Now, this is on top of everything. You'll see what's nice is that since I drew this after I created the layers, it actually drew it across the entire length of the animation, which we're actually going to extend out here in just one moment. So you'll also notice that it comes out with this, right now my purple ears could be blue or something like that, and it's filling over everything. So I'm going to change that by clicking on the black arrow and clicking on the fill on the inside. Right now it says, let's see, it says I have a stroke, so it's a drawing object, I've got a stroke and a fill, so I'm going to click on that fill and change it to 0, change it to nothing. Now the next thing that I want to do is make sure that I have, let's see, 1 pixel, maybe a 2 pixel border would be nice. I'm going to make it just a little bit thicker so I can really see it. And the last thing that we want to do is change our X and Y position and our width and height to match our drawing. So this will be 0, 0. This will be width is 300, and our height will be 250. Oops, we have to turn off the width and height being aligned with each other, so we can distort that shape and get it to fit just the way we want it to. So now our numbers are 0, 0, 300 width, and 250 height, because this is the right size. Add, and we're pretty good. Seems like that fits much, much better. And the last thing that we want to do is just make this animation last a little bit longer before it repeats. Because if we just go ahead and test it now, what will happen is it'll get to frame 100 and it'll play really, really quickly, and then it'll go back to frame 1 and play over again. And we're going to have this movie so it automatically repeats. So I'm going to come out to maybe frame 140 or so, and just click and drag for the top 5 layers, and right click and choose Insert Frame. And what that does is that extends out the length of that animation to that length. Now let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to call it Animated, so I know what it is. And we are ready to test our movie. Now to test our animation, let's do Control test movie. And you can also see Control Enter is what does it. So there's our animation. Happens pretty fast, so we could adjust our timing at a later time, but we're not going to right now. But let's go ahead and close that and take a look at the folder where those files were. Now you'll see here's the Swift file, which is the output file, and here's why Flash became so popular. This is 57.7K for that animation versus the animated GIF, which is 1.79 megs. This file is, what, 800 times larger or something crazy. Much, much larger than this Swift ad. And this is one of the reasons that Flash became so popular. Is that for things like this, you could create very compelling animation and have really small file sizes. And there was just nothing that could match these capabilities. So let's go ahead and stop our video here, and in the next one we're going to do the last step, which is creating a button for our animation that will open up to a web page and then saving out our HTML files.